March 13th, 1948. Something amazing would happen in the hockey world. For the first time in NHL history, a Chinese hockey player would get a chance of a lifetime, getting to play in the National Hockey League in front of thousands of people. But that glory and fame would come short-lived. This is how the first Asian hockey player was denied the opportunity to thrive in the NHL. The story of Larry Kwong. Lawrence Kwong, born as Ng Kai Kong, was born in Vernon, British Columbia of Canada on June 17, 1923. His first exposure to hockey came when he was very young. Every Saturday evening, he would get a chance to listen to Toronto Maple Leafs games on the radio. He dreamt of one day playing in the NHL, but unfortunately, during these times, Chinese Canadians were not able to vote and were limited to job opportunities. This would hurt Kwong in many ways, but he wouldn't let that get to him. At the age of 15, he would get his chance to play for the midget and juvenile hockey leagues for the Vernon Hydrophones, winning 2 championships in 1939 and 1941. His contributions to the championships would earn him recognition in town and was known as the China Clipper. In 1941, at 18 years old, he would join a senior amateur hockey team, the Trail Smoke Eaters. At the time, they were the best senior hockey team in the world. Kwong was able to make the team and played his way through the lineup, showing his skills as a reliable teammate and recording 22 points in 29 games. During these years, he would face many roadblocks while playing hockey as a Chinese player, getting denied jobs and even advancements of his hockey career. One day, in 1943, Kwong would receive an invite from a minor league team, the Cleveland Barons of the AHL. This is often a misconception as it was believed it was the Chicago Blackhawks who contacted Kwong. Unfortunately, the Canadian government refused to provide the documentation needed for him to leave the country, missing his chance to go to the US, and he remained in Canada. In between the next 2 to 3 years, Kwong would play for various teams around Canada, even landing a hockey team when he was drafted to the Canadian Army in 1944. He would play for his basis hockey team, the Red Deer Army Wheelers, in the Central Alberta Garrison Hockey League. After the war had ended, Kwong would return playing for the Trail Smoke Eaters once again, scoring 20 points in 19 games and making the finals, winning the league's trophy, leading the Smoke Eaters with 8 goals in 10 games, which included the championship game-winning goal. During the Smoke Eaters' run to the finals, Hank Vinny, a New York Rangers scout, witnessed Kwong's hockey abilities and saw that he had the talent and the potential to play hockey at a higher level. Kwong would be invited to amateur tryouts for the New York Rangers in Winnipeg. Amazingly, he would make the team, assigning him to their minor league farm team, the New York Rovers. Kwong was now one step closer to his dream of playing in the NHL. He would prove that he was a legitimate hockey player and thrived on his new team, even scoring in his debut game. Attendance for the Rovers would immediately increase at Madison Square Garden, as well as gaining new fans from the Chinese community in New York City, as many wanted to witness Kwong and his skills as a hockey player. That same year, Kwong would also be presented with the keys to New York's Chinatown. Then, in the 1947-48 season, while leading the team in scoring, he would receive the call he was waiting for. A few injuries from the Rangers roster left a slot open to fill. He was assigned to play for the New York Rangers on March 13, 1948, playing against the Montreal Canadiens, up against legends such as Maurice Richard and Doug Harvey. This was what Kwong dreamed of ever since he was a little boy. This would be one of the highest points of his career, but also one of the lowest as well. The game started. Larry was at the bench, waiting to get on the ice. A minute passes. The end of the first period. Then the second. Finally, in the third period, the signal he was waiting for. He would step onto the ice, but it was short-lived, skating in the last shift, playing in just under a minute before the game had ended. The next day, Kwong would make it onto newspapers about his debut. But what the papers didn't tell you was that he was only given little ice time, which began and lasted at the end of the game. Kwong recalled that he was disappointed, stating in a 2013 interview, he mentioned that, "When I had a chance to become a Ranger, I was really excited. That's what I wanted to be since I was a young boy. I wanted to play in the NHL. I didn't get a real chance to show what I can do." After that game, he was sent down back to the Rovers. Kwong was hoping he would get another chance. He would see his teammates getting called up, and despite leading the team in scoring, he started to lose hope. After spending 2 years with the Rovers organization, Larry felt that he would not get another chance to play in the NHL again. So, in 1948, Larry would move on to play for the Valleyfield Braves in the Quebec Senior Hockey League. Larry went on to have a successful career where he would lead his team in scoring, winning a championship, and even being named MVP of the Quebec League. There were many questions, such as why did the Rangers coach only play him for his last shift, and why was he only ever called up to play in one game despite being one of the best players? Understanding why this occurred, we have to go back several years within the Rangers organization. One thing that was speculated was that the Rangers were one of the first NHL teams trying to market their team to new audiences. As a business, you want to capitalize in appealing to your target audience. When it comes to trying to promote the game, you want people to feel connected. New York City has one of the largest Chinese populations in the US, and when there are skilled players of a certain heritage that has never been exposed to the sport, you have an opportunity for an untapped market. With the Rovers playing in Madison Square Garden, this attracted a lot of Chinese Americans to games, but for whatever reason, Kwong was unable to make the Rangers lineup. And the New York Rangers organization are no strangers to these public stunts. In the 1926-27 season, in order to appeal to the Jewish population in New York City, a New York publicist attempted to change the last name of an upcoming Rangers goaltender, Lawrence Chabot, to Lawrence Chabotsky. That same year, Finnish-Canadian Ali Ranica was given an Italian nickname in an attempt to attract the Italian audience. It was no coincidence that a year after Kwong left the Rangers organization was when the team would attempt to recruit Herb Carnegie, a black Canadian player, to their training camp. They only offered Herb a spot to play for their farm teams, but Herb saw right through the deception and knew his skills and talent was far better to be in the minor league system. So the big question is, was his game in the NHL just a public stunt? The US and Canada weren't exactly ready for a transition as tensions and racial discrimination was still at large, but one thing you can't take away was that this was a major stepping stone for diversity in sports and for hockey. After a few years, he moved to Europe, where he played in Great Britain and Switzerland. After his playing career, he coached for over a decade, becoming the first coach of Asian descent to coach a European team. After Larry's retirement in hockey, he returned to Canada in 1972. It can be easy for many people to say that he doesn't deserve to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame, but you have to realize he was one of the first players of color to ever play at the NHL level. His achievements alone makes him an easy standout. He dominated every league he could ever play for, was always, if not, the leading scorer on his team, and despite all the difficulties he went through, he never gave up his dream to play for the sport he loved, and even grew the sport in Europe. Unfortunately, Larry Kwong is no longer with us, having passed away on March 15, 2018. 2 days after the 75th anniversary of his NHL debut. Larry Kwong would have been turning 100 in June. With the most recent inductees, such as Willie O'Ree and Herb Carnegie, two black players who broke barriers, I believe it's time that Kwong's story should be heard. If you want to help out with additional support, there's a petition at change.org. As of making this video, it has reached over 10,000 signatures. The more recognition we can get, the more we can share his story. It's Larry's turn to be inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Some people call me a role model, and I feel very proud of that. I want to be remembered that if I want something, I would try to get it. When I was a kid, all we wanted to do was skate and play hockey. If I was young again, I would do exactly what I did.